is your sense of the dog that hasn't barked yet? I mean, Michael Cohen hasn't fallen apart. He hasn't melted. He hasn't erupted. He hasn't stood up and screamed,
No.
you know, liar, liar, pants. I mean, Michael Cohen has kept his you-know-what together under a cross so bad that the person carrying it out has apologized to the jury in front of the jury.
Right. We did hear Michael Cohen yell once this morning, though, and it was during a recording. It was the first time the jurors have actually heard the other side of Michael Cohen. But he has really kept it together under pressure. I mean, it's especially today. I maybe just have a little bit of a different take on calling balls and strikes here on what happened today in court. And I think both things can be true. And we should talk about that. But I also think that they did some damage to Michael Cohen today. They spent, I don't know how many hours, several hours this morning going through his lies. And at points you were just like, where are they going? Because it was moving everywhere. But they were not just minor lies. They were lies under oath, just like he is under oath now. They did that, and then they lead up to the call. And I thought it was effective. I thought it cast some doubt on the credibility of that call. He has a minute and 36-second call that he places to Keith Schiller. And right before that, he's not just getting one harassing call. He's getting multiple harassing calls from an unknown number. One time, the person forgets to hide the number. He gets the number. He has a long back and forth with the person saying, and the person's 14 years old, allegedly. We don't know this for sure. We don't know what's going on here, but the person's like, oh, I'm really sorry. And Michael's like, I'm very Michael Cohen. I'm going to sick the Secret Service on you. And they have a whole exchange.
Michael Cohen wasn't a protectee of the Secret Service.
Yeah, I know, but this is the threat. And then he calls Keith Schiller. And in that call, he managed apparently to achieve both, to relay all this information about the harassing phone call to Keith Schiller, and then he manages also to get through to the president and relay the information about the payment to Stormy has been made. That could have happened, but I felt that it was effective, that they cast some doubt on it. But to Vaughn's point, even if they did, there's so much more evidence that they haven't even brought up. Most of the cross-examination has simply been a character assassination of Michael Cohen, and not to say that they don't need to do that, but they haven't spoken to so much of the evidence already, and it looks like they're wrapping up. So I think they're hoping that this one shot that they think is effective will cast doubt on everything. I'm skeptical of that, but I did think today they got a hit in, and it's not a knockout, but it was a hit.
We say every day we have no idea what's landing with the jury. I have been on a jury 2 times, so I only speak as a former juror. Sometimes what you're experiencing is agitation that you're still there. Sometimes you're riveted. Sometimes you are feeling what the lawyers want. We have no idea.
No idea.
I want to ask you, Charles, about something David Kelly said on this program, which is that he has put up witnesses, and I think his word was schizophrenic drug addicts, and he was quick to say Michael Cohen isn't that. Mm-hmm. But once a case has been established, to the degree that this case has been established through documents, through witnesses very friendly and affectionate toward the defendant, you're, in his example, schizophrenic drug addict. You know what they say, they're there as a corroborator. So the mission itself, stepping back, of destroying, smearing, and maligning a witness who the prosecution on direct was pretty thorough in impugning and indicting his past conduct, including, I think, everything Todd Blanche went over today, the lies to Congress, the guilty pleas, the prison. I think the prosecution had dealt with most of those chapters of Michael Cohen's life on direct.
I think that the prosecution has ample space to make this case not about Michael Cohen's testimony, given everything else that they've presented on their case in chief. There's so much other evidence that they can rely on in terms of summation, where you don't have to necessarily put Michael Cohen at the center in terms of his credibility and everything that he talked about. There are enough other witnesses who provided evidence and testimony that has placed Michael Cohen in the room, that has made Michael Cohen an actor, such that it corroborates his account of what things are, and you don't have to take it firsthand from him if you think that he's a scumbag or unbelievable or what have you. Any prosecutor, particularly at the state level, has dealt with unsavory witnesses that we wish we had alternatives for, and you don't. And so the way around that is to focus on the evidence that works for you and the witnesses that aren't as problematic to make your case. They can easily do it. I think that the defense, in terms of where this sort of punch today landed, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. It's about the heft of the hit that they made in terms of the prosecution's case. And I would agree with Sue, this October 24th phone call is not something to sort of gloss over and miss. But to Vaughn's point, and I think Vaughn is absolutely correct, when you step back, you still have to answer the question to the jury, does this still make sense in terms of the overall narrative that you are trying to get the jury to buy? If you're the defense, to Andrew's point, are you going to try and say Michael Cohen did all of this out of the goodness of his heart? He got upset. He was still personal attorney to the president of the United States of America, and he's lying about everything. That's a lot for the jury to sort of process in one sitting. I do think, and this is important though, as we sit and have conversations about the defense and their strategy doesn't have to be as well defined as the prosecution, because all they're trying to do in any realm that they can is create reasonable doubt. I do think that there is a conversation to be had about whether the inconsistency or perceived inconsistency around this October 24th conversation creates reasonable doubt in the minds of a juror. So it's important to understand the jury's, the defense's line, it doesn't have to be straightforward. It can be all over the place because all they're trying to do is poke a hole.
Well, I guess, Vaughn, I would just say as a former juror, if I've sat there for 19 days and whether I was going to decide that there was evidence that he was innocent or guilty hinged on the October 24th call, I probably wasn't going to go with guilty in the first place. I mean, what is your sense of what else Blanche has? We've just learned that Blanche plans to be done Monday before the morning break, so he doesn't have much more. So this was it, probably either his second best shot or sort of beginning of the end. I don't know I don't know how much time there is Monday before the first morning break.
Right. I think that there's a question. Does he go back to the morning of October 26 when Donald Trump and Michael Cohen had two different phone calls lasting several minutes before Cohen went and set up an account over at First Republic to begin that wire transfer? Is he going to ask him about the October 28th phone call in the 11 a.m. hour after he finalized the non-disclosure agreement with Stormy Daniels through Keith Davidson? Those are outstanding questions, and this story will come through closing arguments. And as I've learned from Andrew Weissmann, it's the job of the prosecution to prove the defendant's guilt. At the same time, the defense for Donald Trump has yet to provide an alternative story or an alternative timeline to the events that the prosecution has detailed in chronological order. The defense team, Todd Blanche and Susan Neckles, they have not provided for this jury a more specific timeline of when Donald Trump did, in fact, become familiar with this alleged arrangement of $130,000 from Michael Cohen to Stormy Daniels. Was it in early February 2018 after the Wall Street Journal wrote about it? Those are some of those outstanding questions that, frankly, the jury in closing arguments, when they're looking at the two-side storylines, they're very different because Donald Trump publicly hasn't answered those questions. And so far, his defense attorneys haven't tried to paint their own clear version of events for this jury either.
So Andrew, on that point of Vaughn's, I mean, so the defense's story is that he didn't have sex with Stormy Daniels. He did make every single decision. He did require his CFOs and other lieutenants to haggle down every single bill, and he did pay more than 2x what the reimbursement is to Stormy Cohen without looking at it.
And didn't take any negative actions with respect to Weisselberg and Cohen. In other words, this is somebody who
to Vaughn's also other point, I'm sorry, is Cohen's in the fold till 18.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So the idea is this has happened behind his back, which, we know from everyone is not supposed to happen. And as Michael Cohen has repeatedly said today, like, if I did that, I'd be fired. So this is all happening. The story has to be, it's all happening behind his back. And he did not know about it. And what happens? Weisselberg and Cohen, according to Hope Hicks, he says Hope Hicks has him saying, "Thank God Michael did this." I mean, this isn't what the hell did you do? And I can't believe that you passed these checks to me, and I didn't know what I was signing, and I'm paying you twice as much money as I should be, and you never told me.
And I did it 12 times.
And by the way, I'm now on record saying I reimbursed Michael Cohen for payments to a porn star. I mean, it's not like he hasn't admitted that. So the narrative is going to be difficult. I wanted to just raise one thing,
Please.
that because this is definitely like you always try your last case. A blunder.
I can't wait for this.
This is going to be the Mueller investigation. But there was Todd Blanche did do a better job today. As I said, low bar, but he did do a better job. But with respect to the testimony where Michael Cohen lies in front of Congress, and the lies are distancing Donald Trump from the Moscow Tower, that is.
We should say what they are. He lies about the times that he talked to Trump about building a Trump Tower Moscow.
Exactly.
It was 10 and he says 3 before Congress.
Exactly.
But there's reasons why.
And he wants to also make it earlier. So he's trying to basically be like, don't worry, not during the campaign, and it was much smaller.
No collusion.
It was very much like this. It was earlier and it was little. And so and Todd Blanche goes to that and says, and you submitted a 2-page document. This wasn't your spur of the moment testimony. This was a 2-page document that's false. And Michael Cohen on cross, this is like, you shouldn't be bringing out bad facts, says, yes, that's not just my statement. That false statement that I admitted was perjury, which, by the way, could only have been done for the president, right? Michael Cohen had zero interest personally in that. That was done by a joint defense committee that included the president of the United States lawyer. Right. I mean, that was like if you want sort of the Costello, like what's happening behind the scenes, what are the lawyers doing? I mean, he just directly implicated Donald Trump in that scheme.
Well, and back to the narrative that you keep bringing us back to, if the narrative is that he rolled like a mob boss, Cohen on cross gave them another example of how he did that.
Totally.